I'm Clorinda, 22 years old, and this is the story of how my father abandoned me for his new wife, Sandra. The day he chose her over me was the day I packed my bags and moved in with my brother James across the country. I never imagined Dad would come crawling back begging for forgiveness. But when he did, I had news that would change everything between us forever. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stick around to see how I turned my heartbreak into the most satisfying revenge. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I had what most would consider a picture-perfect family. My mum Margaret was the heart of our home, always filling it with laughter and warmth. My dad Richard worked as an engineering manager at a construction firm, providing us with a comfortable middle-class life. We weren't wealthy, but we never wanted for anything important. Mum decorated our modest two-story home with flea market finds she lovingly restored. She had an eye for seeing potential in things others discarded. Dad would joke that was why she married him. Their playful banter and obvious love for each other gave me a strong foundation of what a healthy relationship should look like. When I was 15, our world shattered. Mum was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. Those 3 years of her illness were a blur of hospital visits, hopeful remissions, and crushing relapses. Through it all, Dad was her rock. He scheduled his work around her treatments, researched experimental options, and still somehow made it to my school events. I tried my best to help too. I learnt to cook her favourite meals when she was having good days and could eat. I took over the household chores without complaint. My older brother James had already moved to Portland for a promising architecture job 2 years before Mum got sick. He visited when he could, but the distance made it difficult for him to be as involved in her daily care. When I turned 18, just 3 months before my high school graduation, Mum lost her battle. The house that had once felt so full of life became a mausoleum of grief. Dad and I moved through those first few months like ghosts barely speaking, but finding comfort in each other's presence. While my classmates prepared for college, I made the decision to defer my acceptance to Northwestern. Dad never asked me to stay, but the thought of leaving him alone in that house felt impossible. Instead, I got a part-time job at a local bookstore and spent my evenings making sure Dad ate something besides frozen dinners. Our shared grief forged a special bond between us. We would sit in the living room most nights, sometimes talking about Mom, sometimes just silently watching her favourite old movies. Occasionally, Dad would share stories from when they first met in college, tales I'd never heard before. Those moments felt like precious gifts. James called regularly, concerned about both of us. He repeatedly offered to have me come stay with him in Portland, insisting I shouldn't put my life on hold. But I wasn't ready. Neither was Dad. By the time I turned 20, we had established a new normal. Dad was going to work regularly again, even accepting social invitations from colleagues occasionally. I enrolled in community college, taking classes in literature and psychology. I wasn't sure what career I wanted yet, but it felt good to be learning again. The house still held Mum's presence in 1,000 little ways. Her collection of antique teacups still lined the dining room hutch. Her gardening gloves still hung by the back door, even though the flower beds had become a bit overgrown. Neither of us had the heart to disturb these little shrines to her memory. Our first Christmas without Mum was especially difficult. We decided not to put up the big artificial tree that had been a family tradition. Instead, we placed a small live pine on the coffee table and decorated it with just her favourite ornaments. We ordered Chinese food and watched It's a Wonderful Life, both of us crying unashamedly during the final scenes. As winter turned to spring, I noticed subtle changes in Dad. He started getting haircuts more regularly. He lost some of the weight grief had added to his frame. He mentioned co-workers' names more often in conversation. One Friday night, he even announced he was going to a work happy hour and not to wait up. I was genuinely happy for these signs of healing. I had started dating again myself, nothing serious, but it felt good to be rejoining the world of the living. Mum would have wanted that for both of us. "You seem happier lately, Dad," I mentioned one morning over breakfast. "It's nice to see." "Kissen." He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I am feeling better. And I've been thinking maybe you should reconsider Northwestern for the fall semester. You've put your life on hold long enough." I was surprised but touched by his concern. "I'm okay with community college for now. Let's see how the year goes." What I didn't know then was that Dad wasn't just healing. He was already planning a complete demolition and reconstruction of our lives, and I wasn't included in the blueprint. The first time I heard Sandra's name, it seemed insignificant. Dad mentioned casually that Sandra from marketing had helped him prepare for a client presentation. Then a week later, it was, Sandra recommended this new restaurant downtown. I thought nothing of it, happy that he was forming workplace friendships. About 3 months after these mentions began, Dad sat me down one evening with an uncharacteristically nervous expression. "Clorinda, there's someone I'd like you to meet," he said, fiddling with his coffee mug. "I've been seeing someone. Her name is Sandra." I was momentarily stunned, not because I didn't want him to date, but because he'd been keeping it secret. "How long so?" I asked. "About 3 months now," he admitted. I didn't say anything at first because I wasn't sure if it would go anywhere, but it's getting serious, and it's important to me that you two meet. I smiled and hugged him, genuinely happy that he'd found someone. I'd love to meet her dad. Sandra came for dinner that Friday. She arrived precisely on time, dressed in an expensive-looking cream blouse and tailored black pants. At 38, she was 14 years younger than my father. Her dark hair was cut in a sleek bob, and she wore makeup that was subtle but flawless. She brought an expensive bottle of wine and a forced smile. "This house has so much character," she said as Dad gave her a tour. I noticed her eyes lingering on Mom's eclectic decorating choices, her expression unreadable. During dinner, I learned that Sandra was a marketing executive who'd been divorced for 5 years with no children. She spoke confidently about her career achievements and asked polite questions about my classes, but something felt off about her interest in me. It seemed performative, like she was checking a box on a list titled "Get to Know Boyfriend's Daughter." "Richard tells me you're still deciding on your major," she said, cutting her chicken into precise pieces. "Have you considered marketing? I know several internship opportunities that might help you get your foot in the door." Before I could answer, she continued, "Though honestly, at your age, I was already finishing my degree at Boston University. Taking time off can make it harder to get back on track." Dad jumped in. "Clorinda took time off for good reasons, Sandra." "Of course," she backpedaled smoothly. "I just meant that now might be the time to get serious about her future." It was the first red flag, her speaking about me in the third person while I sat right there. But I brushed it aside, wanting to support Dad's newfound happiness. Over the next few weeks, Sandra became an increasingly common presence in our home. She'd stop by unannounced with takeout dinner. She'd leave items in our bathroom stake, out a section of the hall closet for a spare coat and shoes. The boundaries of our home, the sanctuary Dad and I had preserved, began eroding. One evening, I came home from class to find Sandra rearranging the living room furniture. The vintage armchair that had been Mom's favourite reading spot was now pushed into a corner to make space for a modern glass coffee table that hadn't been there that morning. "Oh, Clorinda," Sandra said when she noticed me frozen in the doorway. "What do you think? Much more open concept now, right?" Richard gave me the go-ahead to update a few things. I sought out Dad, who was in the kitchen preparing a salad as if nothing unusual was happening. "Dad," I whispered, "did you really tell her she could change the living room?" He looked uncomfortable. "She has a good eye for design, Clorinda, and maybe it's time for some changes around here, moving forward and all that." "But that was Mom's chair. You know how much she loved sitting there." His expression hardened slightly. "Your mother isn't here anymore. Sandra is trying to make this place comfortable for all of us." That night marked a shift in our relationship. When Sandra was present, Dad became someone I didn't recognize. My opinions were suddenly dramatic or resistant to change. When I tried to maintain some of our traditions, like Sunday morning pancakes, Sandra would suggest brunch at an upscale restaurant instead. Dad always sided with her. Things came to a head when I came home from work one day to find boxes in the hallway. Peering inside one, I discovered Mum's teacup collection carefully wrapped in newspaper. "What is this?" I asked Dad when he came home. "Why are Mum's things packed up?" "Sandra thought we could use that hutch for her books and design magazines," he explained, avoiding my eyes. "We're just storing the cups in the attic." "You didn't think to ask me first, or at least warn me." "This is still my house, Clorinda," he said, an edge to his voice. "I don't need permission to rearrange things." "It's our house," I corrected. "And those aren't just things. They're Mum's memories." "You're being childish," he snapped. "Sandra is going to be spending a lot more time here, and she deserves to feel comfortable." The bombshell dropped 3 days later. Over a dinner Sandra had prepared, replacing my planned meal, without asking, Dad announced they were engaged after just 6 months of dating. "We're thinking a small ceremony next month," Sandra said, showing off a diamond ring that must have cost more than a semester of college tuition. "Nothing elaborate, just close friends and family." "Next month," I echoed, struggling to process. "That's really fast, isn't it?" "When you know," Dad said, squeezing Sandra's hand on the table. "We're not getting any younger." Sandra laughed, a sound like tinkling glass. "Speak for yourself, Richard." The wedding planning consumed our household. Sandra was over every day making calls to vendors spreading sample materials across the dining table. My input wasn't sought, and when offered, it was politely acknowledged, then ignored. One evening, I overheard Sandra on the phone in the kitchen. "No, the house needs considerable updating, but the location is perfect. Once things are settled, we'll do a full renovation. Yes, hopefully the daughter's situation won't be a long-term issue." I backed away quietly, my heart pounding. The daughter situation. Was that all I was to her? A problem to be solved? I tried talking to Dad about my concerns, but he dismissed them. "Sandra is just excited about building our new life together," he said. "Try to be happy for me, Clorinda. I've been alone for a long time." "I am happy for you, Dad. I just feel like everything's changing so fast, and nobody's asking how I feel about it." "Change is part of life," he replied with the patronizing tone he'd recently adopted. "Sandra thinks you might be more comfortable getting your own place soon anyway. You're 22 now, an adult." I stared at him, hurt blooming in my chest. "Are you asking me to move out?" "Not right now," he backpedaled. "But it's something to think about for the future. You can't live with your old dad forever." As the wedding approached, I felt increasingly like an outsider in my own home. The house that had once been filled with Mum's warmth was transforming into a showcase for Sandra's expensive taste. And my father, the man who had been my closest ally in grief, was becoming a stranger before my eyes. The wedding was held at an upscale restaurant downtown with just 40 guests. I wore a blue dress I'd bought for the occasion, determined to be supportive despite my misgivings. James flew in from Portland the night before, staying in a hotel rather than at our increasingly uncomfortable home. "You look beautiful, sis," James said when he picked me up. "How are you holding up with all this?" I forced a smile. "I'm trying, James. For Dad's sake." James studied my face. "You know my offer still stands. I have plenty of room at my place in Portland if things get too weird here." "Thanks, but this is my home too. I'm not going to be pushed out." If only I'd known how prophetic my brother's offer would become. At the restaurant, Sandra had transformed the private dining room with elegant white flowers and tasteful silver accents. She looked undeniably beautiful in a simple ivory sheath dress. Dad beamed as she walked toward him. For a moment, seeing his happiness, I felt ashamed of my reservations. The ceremony was brief, the reception intimate. I gave a toast that I'd rewritten a dozen times, trying to sound sincere, while avoiding any comparisons to Mom. I spoke about new beginnings and second chances, watching Dad's eyes grow misty as I wished them happiness. Sandra's toast to me was equally diplomatic. And to Clorinda, thank you for sharing your father with me. I know this transition hasn't been easy, but I hope we can build a relationship based on mutual respect. Her emphasis on mutual respect felt pointed, but no one else seemed to notice. After the small wedding cake was cut, James pulled me aside. "I'm worried about you," he said. "Something's not right with this whole situation." "She makes Dad happy," I replied automatically. "Does she? Or does she make him different? The Dad I remember would never rush into something like this." I couldn't argue with that. The father who had taught me to make careful decisions, to weigh all options, had thrown caution to the wind for Sandra. "Just promise me you'll call if you need anything," James said, hugging me tightly before leaving for his red-eye flight. "Anytime, day or night." The newlyweds took a week-long honeymoon in the Caribbean. I used the time to adjust to the idea of our new family structure, telling myself I could make this work. Sandra was here to stay, and I needed to accept that. When they returned, tanned and seemingly blissful reality crashed down quickly. Sandra moved in completely, and the real transformation began. The guest room that had remained largely untouched since Mum's passing was completely gutted within days. The floral wallpaper Mum had lovingly chosen was stripped away, replaced with a stark grey. "We need a proper home office," Sandra explained when she saw my shocked expression. "Richard and I both work from home sometimes." Mum's garden, which I had maintained as best I could, was next. A landscaping crew arrived without warning, digging up her beloved rose bushes to install what Sandra called low-maintenance modern hardscaping. Each change felt like losing Mum all over again, but whenever I objected, Dad would give me the same response. "We need to move forward, Clorinda. Sandra is my wife now." New house rules appeared without discussion. Sandra worked from home 3 days a week and required complete quiet during business hours, meaning I couldn't play music or watch TV even in my bedroom. She implemented a cleaning schedule that included tasks assigned to me without asking if I had classes or work. My grocery items would disappear from the refrigerator because they didn't fit Sandra's keto diet plan. One evening, I came home from a late class to find a note on my bedroom door. In Sandra's precise handwriting, it listed household expectations for adult children living at home, including a requirement to give 24 hours notice before having any friends over a 9 p.m. quiet hours rule, and a monthly contribution to household expenses that was nearly double what Dad and I had previously agreed was fair for my part-time income. I took the note to Dad, who was watching TV in the living room. "Is this for real?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He barely glanced at it. "Sandra and I discussed it, yes. These seem like reasonable boundaries. You discussed it with her, but not with me, Dad. I can't afford this amount for rent right now, not with tuition and my car payment. Then maybe it's time to get a full-time job instead of part-time," he said. "Or take fewer classes. Sandra pointed out that you're taking a very long time to complete your degree." I felt like I'd been slapped. "I'm working at my own pace because I had to deal with losing Mom because I stayed to take care of you." Dad stood up, his face flushed. "Don't use your mother as an excuse, Clorinda. Sandra says, I interrupted. "When did you stop thinking for yourself? When did what I want or need stop mattering to you?" Before he could answer, Sandra appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Is there a problem? I could hear you from upstairs." "Clorinda is upset about the house rules," Dad explained. Sandra sighed as if dealing with a tantrum from a toddler. "Those are standard expectations for an adult living in someone else's home." "This is my home too," I insisted. "I grew up here. Mum wanted—" "Margaret isn't here anymore," Sandra cut in coldly. "Richard and I are trying to build our life together, and frankly, having his adult daughter underfoot isn't part of the plan we envision." I looked to Dad, expecting him to defend me. Instead, he put his arm around Sandra. "Honey, we agreed to give Clorinda time to adjust. It's been 2 months since the wedding, Richard. How much more time does she need? I can't even invite my friends over for dinner because she's always here making everyone uncomfortable with her attitude." "I make people uncomfortable?" I was incredulous. "I barely speak when your friends are here." "That's exactly the problem," Sandra snapped. "You skulk around like we've done something terrible to you. My friends think you're disturbed." "Richard," she continued, turning to my father with tears suddenly springing to her eyes. "I've tried so hard to make this work, but I don't think Clorinda wants me here. This is supposed to be our fresh start, but it feels like we're living with a ghost." Dad's expression hardened as he looked at me. "This has gone on long enough, Clorinda. Sandra is my wife now, and this is her home too. You need to either adapt to the new rules or find somewhere else to live." The words hit me like physical blows. My father was choosing his wife of 2 months over the daughter he'd raised for 22 years. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "I am completely serious," he said. "This is Sandra's house now too, and you need to respect that or leave." I ran to my room, tears streaming down my face. With shaking hands, I called James. "I need to take you up on that offer," I sobbed when he answered. "Dad just chose Sandra over me." I decided not to confront my father again after that night. What was the point? He had made his choice crystal clear. Instead, I waited for the weekend when I knew they would be attending a couple's retreat at a lakeside resort, something Sandra had insisted would strengthen their marriage foundation. Once they were gone, I began packing methodically. Clothes books, personal mementos. I left behind furniture and anything too large to fit in my sedan. As I worked, memories flooded each corner of the house. Mum teaching me to bake cookies in the kitchen, Dad helping me build a science project on the dining table. Family game nights in the living room, Mum always hilariously bad at charades. In the back of my closet, I found a shoebox containing cards and letters Mum had written me over the years. Birthday cards, congratulation notes for school achievements, and a sealed envelope labelled "For Clorinda when you need strength." I tucked this precious box into my suitcase without opening the final letter. Somehow, I wasn't ready yet. By Sunday afternoon, I had loaded my car with everything I wanted to take. The house looked strangely unchanged despite the emotional earthquake that had occurred. I wrote a brief note to my father. "Dad, I'm taking you up on your ultimatum. I'm going to stay with James for a while. I'll text when I arrive safely. Clorinda." No anger, no accusations, just facts. I placed it on the kitchen counter, took one last look around, and closed the door on the only home I'd ever known. The drive to Portland took 3 days. I could have done it faster, but I needed the time to process. In cheap motels along the interstate, I called James each night to update him on my progress and cried myself to sleep. During daylight hours, I drove with windows down and music blaring, trying to drown out the voice in my head that kept asking how my father could discard me so easily. When I finally reached Portland, the early summer rain seemed fitting for my mood. James was waiting outside his apartment building, running to embrace me as soon as I parked. "You made it," he said, hugging me tightly. "I've been so worried." "I'm okay." I lied, the words catching in my throat. "No, you're not," he replied gently. "But you will be." James's apartment was nothing like our childhood home. Located in a converted warehouse downtown, it featured exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and furnishings that managed to be both minimal and comfortable. As a successful architect, he'd created a space that reflected his aesthetic perfectly. "The guest room is all set up, like," he said, carrying my heaviest suitcase. "I put in a desk too, figuring you might want to continue your studies here." The room was larger than my bedroom at home, with a window overlooking the city. James had added small touches to make it welcoming: fresh flowers, a stack of Portland guidebooks, and a framed photo of Mom that made my eyes well up immediately. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." "We're family, Mal," he said simply. "The real kind." I texted Dad as promised. "Arrive safely at James's. Don't worry about me." His response came hours later. "Glad you're safe. Let us know when you're ready to come back and follow the house rules." Hakia, not "I miss you," not "I'm sorry." Just a reiteration that I was the problem that needed fixing. I showed James the text. His jaw tightened, but he just shook his head. "Give it time. He'll realize what he's done." The first week in Portland, I barely left the apartment. James worked during the day while I researched how to transfer my community college credits to a local school. In the evenings, we ordered takeout and watched movies, carefully avoiding discussion of our father. By the second week, I knew I needed to find work. My savings wouldn't last long, and I refused to be a burden on James. A coffee shop near his apartment was hiring, and with my previous retail experience, I landed a job as a barista. The schedule was flexible enough to accommodate classes, and the tips helped supplement my dwindling funds. Portland Community College accepted most of my transfer credits, allowing me to enroll for the fall semester without losing much progress. The routine of work and school planning gave my days structure, a lifeline when everything else felt unstable. Dad called occasionally, brief conversations that never addressed the real issues between us. He'd ask about my job, my classes, the weather in Portland. Sandra sometimes shouted greetings in the background, her voice artificially cheerful. I responded politely but kept emotional distance, protecting what remained of my heart. Social media became a source of both connection and pain. Sandra posted constant updates about their home renovation journey, each image showing another piece of Mom erased. The bright yellow kitchen walls painted white, Mom's handmade quilt replaced by designer bedding. Each change methodically removing traces that Margaret Donovan had ever existed. James encouraged me to block them, but I couldn't look away. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash happening to my childhood. Therapy became my sanctuary. James had added me to his health insurance as a dependent, giving me access to mental health services I desperately needed. My therapist, Dr. Michaels, helped me process the abandonment and betrayal. "What your father did was deeply unfair," she validated during one session. "You have every right to your anger." "Sometimes I don't know if I'm more angry or hurt," I admitted. "They're two sides of the same coin. The depth of your hurt reflects the importance of the relationship." Those weekly sessions became crucial to my healing, as did my growing friendship with James. We'd always been siblings who loved each other, but with a 10-year age gap, we'd never been particularly close. Now cooking dinner together or exploring Portland on weekends, we built the relationship we'd never had the chance to develop. Through James, I met new friends, including his girlfriend Tara, who took me under her wing. She introduced me to a photography class at the community centre, something I'd never considered trying before. "You have a natural eye," the instructor commented after my first assignment. "Have you studied photography before?" I shook my head. "Never. But my mom was always taking pictures. Maybe I got it from her." For the first time since leaving Chicago, I felt a connection to Mom that Sandra couldn't erase. I threw myself into learning everything about photography, spending hours experimenting with James's old digital camera. 6 months after arriving in Portland, I barely recognized my life. I had a job, classes, new friends, and a budding passion for photography. The pain of Dad's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something more manageable, less all-consuming. What I didn't know was that fate was about to hand me an unexpected card to play in a game I didn't even know I was still fighting. The discovery happened on a rainy Sunday in October. James and I had spent the morning organising the apartment's storage closet, a task we'd both been avoiding for weeks. Among James's boxes of college textbooks and architectural drafts, I found a small filing box labelled Family Documents. "What's this?" I asked, holding it up. James glanced over. "Oh, that's where I put copies of important papers. Birth certificates, insurance policies, stuff like that. Mum gave me duplicates of everything before she got really sick, just in case." Inside the meticulously organised folders, I found copies of my parents' marriage certificate, their wills, property deeds, and insurance policies. Out of curiosity more than anything else, I began reading through Mum's will, dated 2 years before her death when she was first diagnosed. What I found made my blood run cold. "James," I called, my voice shaking, "you need to see this." He knelt beside me as I pointed to a specific paragraph in the will. "The family home at 1847 Maple Avenue, Chicago, is to be held in trust for my daughter Clorinda Margaret Donovan. My husband Richard Donovan may continue to reside in the property until such time as he remarries, at which point full ownership shall transfer to Clorinda." James read it twice, his expression darkening. "Are you kidding me? The house is yours? Dad was supposed to transfer it to you when he married Sandra." I couldn't believe what I was reading. There has to be some mistake. Dad would never hide this from me. "The Dad we knew wouldn't," James said grimly. "But the Dad who kicked you out for his new wife, I'm not so sure anymore." We spent the rest of the day combing through the documents, finding additional papers referencing the trust arrangement. There was no mistake. According to Mum's legally executed will, the house had become mine the moment Dad married Sandra. "We need to talk to a lawyer," James insisted. "This is serious, Clorinda. Dad may have committed fraud." The following day, I met with Patricia Winters, a lawyer specialising in estate matters. After reviewing copies of the documents, she confirmed what we'd discovered. "This is very clear," she said. "Your mother created a specific provision that upon your father's remarriage, the house would become yours. There's even a letter here from the trust administrator to your father dated just after the wedding, reminding him of this obligation." My mind reeled. So he knew he had to know. Based on these documents, yes. He was legally required to transfer the property to you. Instead, it appears he's continuing to act as the sole owner. "What does this mean? What can I do?" Patricia leaned forward. "You have several options. We can send a formal notice requiring him to comply with the will's terms. If he refuses, we can file a lawsuit to enforce the provision. Given the clarity of your mother's will, you have a very strong case." I left the meeting with my head spinning. The house where I grew up, the home from which I'd been effectively banished, was legally mine. The implications were enormous. James was waiting at a cafe across from the lawyer's office. "What did she say?" I relayed the conversation as we ordered coffee. "I just can't believe Dad would do this. It's not just wrong, it's illegal." "People do strange things when they're in love," James said, "or whatever this thing with Sandra is." "Do you think she knows?" I asked. "About the will, I mean." James considered this. "We should find out. Can your lawyer get more information, like if Dad has taken out loans against the house or anything?" That question led us down a rabbit hole. Over the next week, Patricia uncovered troubling information. Shortly after the wedding, Dad had refinanced the house, taking out a substantial equity loan. The funds had apparently been used for the extensive renovations Sandra had been showcasing on social media, as well as an expensive new vehicle registered in both their names. "He's spending your inheritance," James said angrily when we learned this. "Money that should legally be yours." But the most shocking discovery came from an unlikely source. One of James's colleagues was friends with someone who worked at Sandra's company. Through this tenuous connection, we learnt that Sandra had been in significant debt before meeting our father. Credit cards, a failed investment in a friend's startup, and an underwater condo she'd been unable to sell. "Do you think she targeted Dad because of the house?" I wondered aloud. "Could she have known about Mum's will?" The answer came in the form of an email thread Patricia's investigator uncovered. 3 months before the wedding, Sandra had contacted a real estate attorney asking about obligations attached to inherited property, and specifically mentioned complications from a prior spouse's will. While not definitive proof, it strongly suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. "She played him," James said, disgusted, "and he fell for it completely." I felt sick. Not just because of the deception, but because Dad had been so thoroughly manipulated. Despite everything, he was still my father, and knowing someone had deliberately exploited his grief and loneliness was painful. But another part of me felt a growing resolve. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about standing up for myself and for Mum's wishes. She had wanted to ensure I had security and a foundation for my future. I couldn't let Sandra steal that from me. "What do you want to do?" James asked after we'd processed all this information. I thought carefully before answering. "I don't want to ambush Dad. Despite everything, I still love him. Let's have Patricia send the formal notice first. Give him a chance to do the right thing. And if he doesn't," I straightened my shoulders, "then we fight." Patricia sent the legal notice the following day. It clearly outlined the terms of Mum's will, the requirement for the property transfer, and requested compliance within 30 days. We waited anxiously for a response. None came directly, but the consequences appeared in other ways. Sandra's social media accounts suddenly went quiet. Dad started calling more frequently, though he never mentioned receiving any legal documents. His calls had a forced cheerfulness that seemed increasingly desperate. "How's your photography class going, sir?" he asked during one call. "James mentioned you're getting quite good." "It's fine," I replied, wondering if he was going to address the elephant in the room. He didn't. Instead, 2 weeks after the notice was sent, he called with unexpected news. "Sandra and I are coming to Portland next weekend," he announced. "We'd love to see you and James. It's been too long." I nearly dropped the phone. "You're coming here." "Why? Can't a father visit his children?" His laugh sounded hollow. "Actually, we've been thinking it's time to heal this family rift. Maybe sell the house in Chicago and get something smaller. We thought we should discuss it with you first." Now it made sense. They needed my signature to sell the house. "I'll check with James about his schedule," I said neutrally. "Text me your flight details." After hanging up, I immediately called my brother. "They're coming here. Dad and Sandra. They want to discuss selling the house." James let out a low whistle. "So they received the notice." "They must have. Why else would they suddenly want to include me in decisions?" "What do you want to do?" I took a deep breath. "I want to hear what they have to say, face to face." "Are you sure this could get ugly?" "I'm sure. It's time to end this one way or another." The restaurant James selected for our meeting was upscale enough to discourage any public scenes, but busy enough that we wouldn't be stuck in awkward silence. I arrived with James 30 minutes early, my stomach in knots. We had strategized extensively about how to handle this confrontation, but I still felt unprepared. "Remember," James said as we claimed a corner table, "let them talk first. See what they're offering before revealing what we know." Dad and Sandra arrived precisely on time. The sight of them walking into the restaurant sent a shock through my system. Dad looked older somehow, stress lines deepening around his eyes. Sandra was impeccably put together as always, but there was a tightness to her smile. "Clorinda," Dad embraced me with genuine emotion. "It's so good to see you." You too, Dad," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. Sandra ear-kissed my cheek. "You look well. Portland agrees with you." James received similar greetings, though I noticed his handshake with Sandra was brief and cold. We ordered drinks and appetizers, engaging in painfully superficial conversation about the weather, my classes, James's latest architectural project. Anyone observing would have thought we were acquaintances, catching up, not a family in crisis. It wasn't until the main courses arrived that Dad finally broached the real reason for their visit. "Clorinda," he began setting down his fork, "I know things didn't end well when you left Chicago. I want you to know I've missed you terribly. Have you—" I couldn't help the edge in my voice. He reached across the table for my hand. "Of course I have. You're my daughter." I think perhaps I wasn't in the best frame of mind after the wedding, trying to balance a new marriage with everything else. "What your father means," Sandra interjected smoothly, "is that we both could have handled things better. We'd like to start fresh." James raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a change of heart. What brought this on?" Dad and Sandra exchanged glances. "Well," Dad continued, "we've been doing some thinking about the future. The house in Chicago is really too big for just the two of us. All those empty rooms, the maintenance. We're considering downsizing," Sandra added. "Perhaps a condo downtown closer to both our offices." "And the house?" I asked innocently. "What would happen to it?" "We'd sell it, of course," Dad replied. "The market in the neighborhood is excellent right now. We could get a very good price." "And that's why you're here?" James asked. "To tell us you're selling the family home." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, there's a bit of a complication. When I went to list the property, our attorney mentioned something about your mother's will. Apparently, there's some language about Clorinda having partial ownership." "Partial ownership?" I repeated, keeping my expression neutral. Yes, Sandra jumped in. A technicality, really. Something about you having a small interest in the property. Nothing major, but we'd need your signature on some paperwork to proceed with the sale. I felt anger rising, but kept my voice steady. And what would I receive from this sale given my small interest? Dad looked relieved that I was engaging with the idea. We thought maybe 20% of the proceeds that would be a nice nest egg for you help with school expenses. 20%? James interjected. That seems rather low for her interest. Sandra's smile tightened. It's actually quite generous, considering Clorinda hasn't contributed to the mortgage or upkeep in months. And whose fault is that? I asked quietly. Dad had the grace to look ashamed. Clorinda, I know, things were said that night, things I regret. But we're trying to make it right. This money could help you start fresh, maybe even buy your own place someday. I studied my father's face, searching for the man who had once put my needs before his own, the man who had taught me about integrity and honesty. He wasn't entirely gone, but he was buried deep beneath layers of Sandra's influence. Dad, I said carefully, what exactly did your attorney tell you about Mum's will? He hesitated. Just that there was some provision about you having an interest in the property. Sandra and I have been so busy we haven't had time to review all the details. Sandra nodded vigorously. It's just a small legal hurdle. We can have our attorney draw up the paperwork for you to sign, and then we can all move forward. I took a deep breath and looked at James, who gave me a subtle nod. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said, reaching for my purse. I've reviewed Mum's will quite thoroughly. I pulled out the copy Patricia had prepared for me. The house doesn't belong to you anymore, Dad. It hasn't since the day you married Sandra. According to Mum's legally binding will, full ownership transferred to me at that time. The colour drained from Dad's face. Sandra froze, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. What are you talking about? Dad asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I slid the document across the table. It's all there. Mum left the house to me with the provision that you could live in it until you remarried. The moment you said I do to Sandra, the house became mine. Dad scanned the highlighted paragraph, his hands trembling slightly. This can't be right. I would have known about something this important. You did know, James said flatly. There's a letter from the trust administrator to you dated 1 week after your wedding, explicitly reminding you of this obligation. Sandra's composure cracked. This is absurd. We've been renovating that house for months. We've invested thousands of dollars in improvements. Improvements to a house that isn't yours, I pointed out. A house you were never entitled to change. Dad looked up from the document, confusion and guilt warring on his face. Clorinda, I swear I didn't understand. There were so many papers after your mother died. I must have missed this somehow. Missed the multiple notices from the trust? James asked skeptically. Missed the letter from your own attorney explaining this very provision. Richard, Sandra hissed, don't say another word. We need to consult our lawyer. I leaned forward. I've already consulted mine. She's prepared to file suit to enforce Mum's will if necessary. She's also very interested in the equity loan you took out on the property, Dad. The one you had no legal right to negotiate. Sandra's face contorted with anger. You ungrateful little bitch, after everything we've tried to do for you. Sandra? Dad exclaimed, shocked at her outburst. No, Richard, she snapped. I'm not playing nice anymore. We offered her 20%, which is far more than she deserves. And now she's threatening us with legal action over a house her mother left decades ago. My mother died 4 years ago, I corrected coldly, and she specifically wanted me to have that house as my inheritance. She knew how much it meant to me. Dad seemed to age before my eyes. I didn't know Clorinda. I truly didn't. For the first time, I wondered if that might actually be true. Had he been so consumed by grief, so manipulated by Sandra, that he'd genuinely missed something this significant? Sandra wasn't finished. This is ridiculous. We've been living in that house, paying the taxes, the insurance. You can't just swoop in and claim it's yours. Actually, I can, I replied. And I am. My lawyer has prepared a notice giving you 60 days to vacate the property. 60 days? Dad looked stricken. You're evicting us from our home. It's not your home, Dad. Not legally, not anymore. And it stopped feeling like home the moment you chose Sandra over me. The words hung in the air between us, the raw truth finally spoken aloud. Sandra grabbed her purse and stood abruptly. We're leaving, Richard. I won't sit here and be insulted by your daughter. Dad remained seated, staring at the documents. Sandra, wait. We need to figure this out. "There's nothing to figure out," she snarled. "We'll fight this in court. Your daughter thinks she can steal our home. Let her try." "It's not stealing when it legally belongs to me," I said quietly. "And before you waste money on attorneys, you should know we've already discovered the emails you sent asking about obligations attached to inherited property before the wedding." "You knew about Mum's will all along, didn't you, Sandra?" Her face froze, and for a moment I saw behind the carefully constructed facade to the calculating woman beneath. Without another word, she turned and stormed out of the restaurant. Dad watched her go, then turned back to me, devastation etched on his face. "Clorinda, please. I don't know what's happening anymore. I can't lose my home and my daughter in the same day. You already lost me, Dad," I said, tears finally spilling. "The day you told me to leave if I couldn't adapt to Sandra's rules. The day you chose her over me." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I need time, Dad. Time to process all of this." "What happens now?" he asked, his voice small. James answered for me. "You receive the formal notice tomorrow. You have 60 days to vacate the property and return any items belonging to our mother that remain in the house. The outstanding loan will need to be resolved as part of the legal settlement." "Okay." Dad nodded numbly. "And Sandra? Did she really know about this all along?" I shrugged. "That's something you'll need to ask her. But the evidence suggests she targeted you, at least partly for financial reasons." He closed his eyes briefly. "I've been such a fool." "Yes," I agreed. "You have." As he stood to leave, he looked at me one last time. "For what it's worth. Clorinda, I'm sorry. More sorry than you can ever know." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The aftermath of our Portland confrontation unfolded over the following weeks with surprising speed. Despite Sandra's threats of legal action, their attorney apparently advised them that fighting the clear terms of Mom's will would be futile and expensive. 3 days after Dad returned to Chicago, he called to tell me that Sandra had moved out. "She left as soon as I confronted her about knowing the house wasn't ours to sell," he explained, sounding exhausted. "Took her clothes and personal items and said she needed space to think." "I'm sorry, Dad," I said and meant it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in his pain. "Don't be," he replied. "You were right about her. When she realized there was no money to be made from the house, she showed her true colors." Over the next several weeks, Dad complied fully with the legal notices. He arranged for all the remaining items of Mom's to be carefully packed and shipped to my address in Portland. He provided the documentation needed to resolve the equity loan issue, taking full personal responsibility for the debt. And he began looking for an apartment near his office. I struggled with complex emotions during this time. Vindication, certainly. Relief that the house Mum had loved would not be completely erased by Sandra's renovations. But also sadness for my father, who had made terrible choices but was still the man who had raised me with love. James urged caution. "He's doing the right thing now because he has no choice. Don't forget how quickly he threw you aside for Sandra." "I haven't forgotten," I assured him. "But I can't hate him forever, James. He's still our dad." The legal process concluded with a settlement agreement. Dad would vacate the property within the agreed time frame, surrender all claims to the house and resolve the improper loan. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue additional damages for the unauthorized renovations or the months he had improperly occupied the property after remarrying. 2 months after our confrontation in Portland, I returned to Chicago to inspect the house before listing it with a realtor. I had decided selling was the best option. Despite the emotional attachment, I couldn't imagine living there again, and maintaining a property from across the country would be impractical. Dad met me at the door looking thinner and older than when I'd seen him last. The house was meticulously clean, with boxes stacked neatly in the living room. "I'll be out by tomorrow," he said, just finishing the last of the packing. We really walked through the rooms together, a strange reversal of the tour he'd given Sandra that first night. The renovations were extensive. Mum's cozy, eclectic design choices had been replaced with Sandra's cold, modern aesthetic. Walls had been moved, flooring, replaced colours changed. It barely resembled the home of my childhood. "I'm sorry about what happened to the house," Dad said, as we stood in the kitchen. "If I'd known it was meant for you, I never would have allowed the renovations." "Would you still have married her?" I couldn't help asking. He considered the question seriously. "I did love her, Clorinda, or I thought I did. But knowing what I know now about her motives, no, I wouldn't have." We ended up sitting on the floor of the empty living room, 2 cups of coffee between us, talking more honestly than we had in years. "I was lost after your mother died," he admitted. When Sandra came along, she was so confident, so certain about everything. It felt easier to follow her lead than to keep making decisions on my own. "You stopped listening to me," I said. "You dismissed everything I felt or wanted." He nodded, eyes downcast. I thought I was moving forward, but really I was running away. From grief, from responsibility, from the hard work of building a new life that honored what came before. "Do you know where she is now?" I asked. "Back with her ex-husband, apparently. He's a corporate attorney. The divorce was never about incompatibility, it seems. Just finances." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past 2 years between us. "What will you do now?" he finally asked. "Sell the house," I said. "Use the money to finish my degree in Portland. I've discovered I love photography. I might pursue that professionally." "And us?" His voice was hesitant. "Is there any way back from what I did?" I thought carefully before answering. "I don't know, Dad. You hurt me deeply. You chose someone else over me when I needed you most. That's not something I can just forget." He nodded, accepting this. "I understand. I wouldn't forgive me either." "I didn't say I won't forgive you," I clarified. "Just that it will take time and effort, real effort from both of us." A glimmer of hope appeared in his tired eyes. "I'd like that. To try, I mean. Whatever it takes." 2 weeks later, the house sold for more than the asking price. Sandra's modern renovations had actually increased the property value considerably, an irony not lost on any of us. After paying off the remaining mortgage and the equity loan Dad had taken out, I had enough to complete my education and potentially start a small photography business. Dad found an apartment in Chicago, but 3 months later he called with news. "I've been offered a position with the company's Portland office," he said. I thought being closer might help us rebuild, if that's something you want." I was surprised by my own reaction. "I think I'd like that, Dad. No promises, but I'd like to try." By Christmas, Dad had relocated to a small apartment about 20 minutes from James's place. We started with weekly coffee meetings, then dinners, where James sometimes joined us. Slowly, cautiously, we began rebuilding what had been broken. Dad started therapy too, working through his grief over Mum and his guilt about Sandra. He volunteered at a grief support group, helping others navigate the complicated emotions he'd handled so poorly himself. I graduated the following spring with a degree in visual arts and opened a small photography studio, with the remaining proceeds from the house sale. Focusing my lens on the world around me helped me see beauty again, even in unexpected places. One evening, as Dad helped me hang photographs for my first gallery, showing I remembered the sealed envelope from Mum I'd packed away that day I left Chicago. "For Clorinda, when you need strength." That night I finally opened it. Inside was a letter written in Mom's distinctive handwriting, dated a few months before she died. "My dearest Clorinda," it began. "If you're reading this, you're facing something that feels impossible to overcome. I wish I could be there to help you through it, but please know that the strength you need is already within you. It always has been." She went on to write about how proud she was of the woman I was becoming, how confident she was in my ability to face life's challenges. "The house is yours when the time comes," she wrote. "Not because you need it, but because you deserve a foundation from which to build your own dreams. Your father will understand this someday." The letter ended. "Remember that family isn't just about blood or obligation. It's about who stays when staying is hardest. Build your life around those people, darling, and know that wherever you go, whatever you choose, my love goes with you, always." I wiped away tears, finally understanding the gift Mum had given me. Not just the house itself, but the chance to discover my own strength in fighting for what was rightfully mine. The opportunity to learn who would stand beside me when things were difficult. The wisdom to know that healing doesn't mean forgetting, but finding a way forward that honors both the pain and the love. Dad and I continue our careful reconstruction of our relationship. Some days are easier than others. The betrayal left scars that may never fully fade, but we're trying, and there's value in that effort alone. James remains my rock, the brother who became my best friend through crisis. We gather monthly for family dinners, creating new traditions to replace those we lost. As for Sandra, I heard she and her ex-husband divorced again 6 months after they reunited. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about the damage she caused, the lives she disrupted in pursuit of financial security. But mostly, I'm too busy building my own life to dwell on hers. Have you ever had to stand up to family when they wronged you? Did you find a way to forgive, or was the break permanent? Share your experiences in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button so others can find strength in what we've shared. Remember that sometimes the most painful chapters of our lives become the foundation for something beautiful and unexpected. Thank you for listening to my journey.